My name is Mwelela Cele. I'm an oral history researcher for Ulwazi program. I'm a senior librarian at the University of KwaZulu Natal Campbell Collections. Today is the 10th of April 2010. We're at DUT, Durban University of Technology, Emerson campus. I'm interviewing Ela Gandhi, or Ela Gandhi, the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi and the Chancellor of the Durban University of Technology, the Deputy Vice Chairperson of the International Center of Nonviolence, ICON.
Okay, Mahatma Gandhi came to South Africa in 1893, and when he came here on business as a lawyer. He was a qualified lawyer, and his values and his outlook to life was completely different from that which he, learned to absorb much later in life at the time when he was leaving South Africa. When he came, he was dressed in a suit and tie, and he was very conscious of both his status as a lawyer, of his dressing. He was, had to have properly starched collars and things like that. And those were the values according to which he lived at that time in 1893. But soon after that, after coming to South Africa, he realized that there was racism in South Africa. He was treated badly because he was not a white person. He was asked to remove his turban at the court house in Durban, where the History Museum is located at the moment. That was the old courthouse. And he had to leave the court because he refused to remove his turban. He was thrown out of the train in Pietermaritzburg, and this was all just a few days after he arrived in South Africa. So those experiences had a tremendous effect on him as a person. And then later on, he saw how other Indian people were treated. One of the things that he had to decide at the Pietermaritzburg station was whether he should just leave South Africa and go away back to India, where he was living a comfortable life, or whether he should stay and accept the situation in the country and adjust to it, or whether he should stay and fight that situation. And that was the crucial decision that he took on that night, that he should stay and fight the situation. So that really changed his life, because now he began to think about how can he change this terrible system in South Africa.
And when did they actually move to the Phoenix settlement?
The Phoenix settlement.
Yes.
The Phoenix settlement was established in 1904, and it was established because Gandhi had read this little book by Tolstoy called Unto This Last, and Tolstoy's philosophy was that he believed that all jobs are equal. Work is work, and we should respect all kinds of work. There shouldn't be a hierarchy that some people are respected more for the kind of work they do and other people are looked down upon. So in other words, he said that a barber's job, a hairdresser, is the same as a lawyer. So why should we discriminate? Or whether you sweep the street, you're still doing a job, and you should be respected as much as you would respect a lawyer or a doctor. So those were the philosophical understanding, that Tolstoy had. And he also believed that people should live a simple life, because if everybody simplified their lives, then everyone in the country would have basic necessities of life, nobody would suffer. It's only because some people want to live a better life that other people suffer. And so, based on that philosophy, Gandhiji felt that he should look for a place in a rural area and simplify his life. So that's when the alteration in his lifestyle began in 1904, and he bought this 100-acre piece of land in Inanda, and he set up a settlement there. He invited people according to that philosophy. If you subscribe to that philosophy, come here, build your little house, and let's all of us live as equals there. We grow our own vegetables and become self-sufficient, and we work in the press, because he had started the Indian Opinion in 1903. In 1903, it was located in Durban. But in 1904, when he set up the Phoenix Settlement, they moved the press to Phoenix Settlement. And so all the people who lived on Phoenix Settlement worked in the Indian Opinion, the press, and they grew their own vegetables and lived together in a communal kind of life.
And who were his neighbors around Phoenix Settlement?
His neighbors were mainly African people, although at that time there was the Mount Edgecombe sugar barracks that was very close to Phoenix Settlement. So the indentured workers who were living in that barracks were close to him, Mount Edgecombe and Waterloo and Blackburn and all those barracks. There were some white people in that area, landowners. There were some Indian landowners who had acquired some pieces of land after finishing indenture. They were given a piece of land and they lived in Inanda as well. But the most prominent people were Mr. Shembe and Mr. Dubé, who lived as neighbors to Gandhiji. And he had very close contact with both Mr. Shembe and Mr. Dubé.
Around this time, how many people were staying at the settlement? Roughly?
Can't give you the exact number, but about 30 to 40 people. Mm-hmm.
So others were working for the printing press, and then other people, what were they doing? Or
there were a number of things
yes.
that people would do, but everyone had a role in the printing press, even as I was growing, as a little child, because the newspaper, everything was done manually. In that printing press, you had types, alphabets. There was a big box with little containers, little spaces, and you had every alphabet in a little box there. And you had to then put the alphabets together in order to make your sentence, your words, your sentence. You had your comma and your full stop there, your capital letters and all that. And you had to put that one at a time, set it, and then your proofs were done by a machine where you put all this as a page on a little board at the bottom, and then you place the paper on it, and you get your proof. And in the same way, it was printed, all done by hand. Then you folded it, you wrote the addresses on the envelope, you stuck your stamps and everything. And all that takes time. So as a little child, I learned to do things, as you grow up, you learn more skills. But as a little child, you know how to fold the newspaper, so you learn how to fold it. And then you learn how to write the wrappers, the addresses on the wrappers, and then you learn how to typeset. So we learned everything, gradually as we grew up. And the same with all the children who lived on the Phoenix settlement and all the residents who lived on the Phoenix settlement. It was their press, and they came in and they learned and they developed the skills. Okay, the day started very early on Phoenix settlement. On a normal day, we would get up at about 5 o'clock in the morning. Usually, my father would, take us out to do some gardening. We did work in the, garden. We planted vegetables, we made compost, collected all the leaves, cleaned up the gardens and so on. So for about an hour and a half early in the morning, we would work in the garden. Of course, it depended on whether it was winter or summer as to what time. So it wasn't a strict timing. Then by about 6 o'clock, we would get dressed and so on, and have breakfast by 7. And then thereafter, it was work in the press, but different things that each person would have to do. Some of us would be busy with cleaning the house and that sort of thing. Others would go to the press and do the work there. My father usually got up at 2 o'clock in the morning and wrote his editorial because he felt that, he could think clearly at that time when everybody else was sleeping and there was quiet and so on. So he would write his editorials at 2, and he would also go for a walk early in the morning. For about 45 minutes, he would go right up to Dube Farm and then come around where Shemi's, place was, and come home. It was about 10 kilometers or something that he would walk on a daily basis. And all the people used to see him going around, so they knew that early in the morning it's my father who would be walking around there, and he would come back by about 6 and then, join us with whatever we were doing. And and then go to the press and start work there.
Can you also tell
In
us?
the evenings, we had prayers every evening at 5:30, 6 o'clock, between 5:30 and 6. And usually the prayers comprised of all religious faiths. So we had a Christian prayer, a Hindu prayer, a Muslim prayer. We also had a Parsi prayer because there were some people who were of Parsi background. They would then say a Parsi prayer. And if we had people of other religious faiths, they would say their prayer as well. And it was usually in the open. There was no like a temple or anything. We didn't believe in having a particular kind of building in which you have to pray. We prayed in the open.
And tell us about the philosophy of passive resistance. I mean, exactly when did it begin and its influence to other leaders?
Okay. Passive resistance was there for a long time. I mean, there were lots of people who had, used non-violent ways of dealing with issues. But Gandhiji started Satyagraha, and that was different because Satyagraha now wasn't passive. He said it's this form of resistance is not passive, it's very active. You are actually doing something, you are protesting, and it requires more courage to stand even and be non-violent, even if you're facing a gun. You stand there and it requires more courage than to face an opponent who has got a weapon and hit them or use violence against them. So he then asked for people to coin a word for this kind of movement. And it was in 1906 that people gave in their suggestions, the names that they would think would be appropriate, and he felt that this was the most appropriate name, and that's how Satyagraha came about. The name suggested by the person who wrote the winning essay was Sadagraha, which means compel in a good cause, compulsion in a good cause. But it didn't have truth in it. So Gandhiji said, no, instead of Sadagraha, let's have Satyagraha. Satya means truth, and Agraha means force, or soul force, or, pursuit.
Yes. And this is a Gujarati word?
It's a Sanskrit word, Sanskrit, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And so, yeah, so the philosophy behind Satyagraha was that when you see evil, you shouldn't, by just accepting it, you're condoning evil. That you have to do something about it.
In post 1994 South Africa, you became a member of Parliament. Can you tell us about that?
Okay. Firstly, I forgot to mention that apart from the NIC, I was also involved in the women's organization, which is for me, a very important part of my life, and that is the Natal Organization of Women that I was involved in. And when ANC got unbanned, we joined the ANC Women's League. And that's how I was involved in the political activities, both in Natal Indian Congress as well as the Women's League and the Natal Organization of Women. And so I went into Parliament and, I represented women, for one thing. And also my constituency was Phoenix Township. I represented them. And for me, the first Parliament in 1994 was about changing a lot of things, because there were many, many laws in the country that were not in line with our thinking in terms of non-racism, in terms of non-sexism, in terms of having a more egalitarian society, and so on. So we had to look at these laws and see how we can change these laws in order to achieve these kinds of beliefs that we had. And so it was a long process, very interesting, very hard work. And that's what we did in the first 5 years. I think it's a record number of laws that we made in that year, in that term, and a record number of changes that we made to laws. So it was very hard work, yeah.
Yes. If we can go back to the 80s or 70s, you were also banned, am I right?
That's right.
Yes.
From 1973 to 1982.
And so under those banning orders, what were you not allowed to do and what were you allowed to do? Can you sort of explain that?
Well, there were a lot of things. The first banning order, it was a house arrest actually. It involved 3 documents. The first document is that you are not allowed to interact with people on a social level. So you're not allowed to communicate with people and that sort of thing. That's the first document that they give you. All social contact is prohibited, but you can go anywhere you like. only thing is you don't, have the social contact with people. The second order is an order which limits you to a place. So you can only travel within a particular boundary. So we couldn't kind of go out of that Verulam magisterial area.
Your former husband was also banned?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, you were banned around the same time?
He was banned before me, 5 years before. He had a 5-year banning order.
Okay.
Then when he got the second banning order, I also was house arrested. The second order for both of us was a house arrest order. The first one for him was a banning order, not a house arrest. So the third order is the house arrest. That means that you can't leave your house between certain times, like 7 o'clock in the evening. You have to be indoors in your home until 7 in the morning. No matter what the emergency or anything, you're not allowed to leave the house. You have to be in the house.
What type of work were you doing at that time that prompted the government to ban you? What type of?
Well, in '72,
yes,
we launched the Natal Indian Congress. I was elected as vice president of the Natal Indian Congress, and in '73, I got a banning order. I was the first one of the Congress officials who was banned. After me, George Supersad, who was the president of NIC, he got banned, and then several other people from the Congress got banned. So I presume that the banning order was because of my activities in Congress, maybe because of the Natal Organization of Women. They don't give you reasons, that. They just tell you you're a danger to the security of the state.